Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Senator Tom Cotton from the great state of Arkansas. Senator Cotton, good morning. Welcome back.
Good morning, Hugh. It's good to be back on with you. I'm not sure what I did to merit Rocky Mountain High. Maybe it's in honor of the president's new most trusted advisor.
No, it's just what the wheel spun round and turned up. I don't really think you are a John Denver fan. Senator Cotton, there's a story today in Ellis News Items, which I haven't seen anywhere else, but I trust news items. And it reads, quote, Japan and the Philippines signed a key defense pact earlier today, allowing the deployment of Japanese forces for joint military exercises, including live fire drills, to the Southeast Asian nation that came under brutal Japanese occupation in World War II, but is now building an alliance with Tokyo as they face an increasingly assertive China. The, quote, reciprocal access agreement, which similarly allows Filipino forces to enter Japan for joint combat training, was signed by, and it goes on to talk about it. Are you surprised by that? Do you welcome it? And what does it mean in the larger scheme of things?
Well, Hugh, I do welcome closer cooperation between our two treaty allies, Japan and Philippines. Remember, the United States has mutual defense treaties with both of those nations. It's especially welcome in the Western Pacific, where there's not a structure such as NATO, but we do have a series of allies like Japan and the Philippines and Australia, wrapping around into the Indian Ocean to countries like India, that help provide us kind of a frontier of freedom, if you will, against Chinese communist aggression. Your listeners may have heard of something called the First Island Chain, which is the chain of islands starting with the Aleutians and kind of running all the way down to Malaysia, that help hem in Chinese ambitions. But the three most important parts of it are Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines, because they're right off China's coasts. So anything that brings Japan and the Philippines closer together, helps them coordinate militarily, helps them operate with us in the event of a crisis there, is a welcome development.
Have you been following the Chinese so-called Coast Guard's incursion into Filipino waters, Senator?
Very closely, Hugh. This is yet another example of Chinese aggression against its neighbors all around its borders, from the southwest, where they've brutally beaten and killed Indian soldiers up at the tippy tops of the Himalayas, and all the way up to Japan, where they threaten Japanese controlled islands as well. But some of the most aggressive activity has been in the South China Sea on these islands that are within Filipino sovereignty, in which so-called Coast Guard vessels, which are really adjuncts of the PLA Navy, are interfering with resupply operations and otherwise harassing Filipino Navy ships. I don't think this has gotten enough attention in Washington. It certainly doesn't seem to be meriting the attention of our president, who should be paying it much closer attention, since, again, we have a mutual defense treaty with the Philippines.
Let me come to one more national security story, Senator Cotton. This is also from Ellis Items, and I saw it nowhere else this morning. The Netherlands will begin sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine, quote, without delay, after export license were granted, Foreign Minister Casper Veldkamp said during a visit to Kyiv this weekend, quote, now that we've got clearance on the first F-16, they will be delivered without delay. Veldkamp said Saturday in a press conference in the Ukrainian capital. Ukraine hopes the advanced U.S.-made jets will help it gain air superiority over Russia and better protect its troops and its cities. Now, one, do you welcome that? And two, why haven't we done the same thing?
Well, unfortunately, Hugh, there has been a very long delay. It is now the second week of July 2024. At the end of February 2022, right after Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, Tony Blinken, the President's Secretary of State, went on a Sunday morning news show and said that we would approve the transfer of those fighter aircraft like those, to Ukraine. Joe Biden immediately walked that back the next day, which is an example of how Joe Biden pussyfooted around for years in Ukraine, enticing Vladimir Putin to be more and more aggressive without giving the Ukrainians what they needed to defend their own territory and to bring this war to an earlier conclusion. Just like Joe Biden tempted Vladimir Putin to go for the jugular in the first place with the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan or early appeasement of Russia in his tenure. And as President Trump said in the debate a couple of weeks ago, that's in contrast to his policy. We saw what happened for 4 years when Donald Trump was president. We don't have to guess. Vladimir Putin did not invade Ukraine or any other country. When Joe Biden, and for that matter, Barack Obama were president, he invaded Ukraine. It only seems to happen when Democrats are president. So this is just another example of how Joe Biden's weakness has invited aggressors around the world to be more aggressive, to threaten more American friends and allies, to put our interests at greater peril.
Now, Senator Cotton, for the benefit of the audience, you did not send me those questions, nor did I tell you what I would be asking. Will you confirm that?
I will confirm that I did not send you any questions, nor did you tell me, nor do I think you sometimes know until it pops in your head live on radio.
Oh, it doesn't. Like I could come up with something about the Red Sox on a short notice because they're so bad and the Guardians are so good. But are you surprised that the president's team is sending out questions to journalists to ask him? Because I actually have never, I've been doing this since 1990. No elected official has ever done that in my 34 years of radio and television.
No, and Hugh, I don't think it's common practice. It's certainly not the common practice for me either. On sometimes, like if you're going to appear on a Sunday morning show, the producers will tell you what you want to talk about so you can be prepared in an informed fashion. But it's at the level of, we want to talk about the Farm Bill this time, or we want to talk about the war in Ukraine, or we want to talk about the 2024 campaign. It's not the actual questions to be asked. So for a normal politician, I would find it surprising. But
no, I often, when the former president comes on, one of his team will send me a couple of articles that said, look at this. And it's not a request, just it might be interesting to go here. That's not what happened here.
No, it's perfectly normal for you as a radio host or me as a senator or any normal American to not have something on front of mind. So if you're going to go on a radio program or a TV program and you're expecting to say talk about the war in Ukraine, and the host society wants to talk about the 2025 tax legislation that Congress has to pass, it may not be as informative of a discussion if you don't at least know that and give some thought, have some chance to collect your thoughts in advance. That is different from having the actual questions, not just provided to you, but given to the host. But again, Hugh, this should not be surprising to anyone with Joe Biden. We've all seen those photographs taken when he does press conferences of the lapel cards that he holds in his hands, that has the picture of the reporter and what they're going to ask. So he doesn't even have to know their name, so he can see their face and call them and know exactly what he's about to get asked. So this is not surprising at all with Joe Biden. It's just another example of what we've all known for years, not just for 12 days, that Joe Biden is not up to the task of being president.
Now, Senator, two of your colleagues in the Senate, Senator Rubio and Senator Vance, were on two of the Sunday shows yesterday, and they both met hosts who deny that the Department of Justice has been weaponized. I have already explained what I think about that. I'm not sure they got the point across. Do you believe the Department of Justice has been weaponized against Donald Trump?
Against Donald Trump and his supporters, Hugh. I mean, Jack Smith has pursued deranged, fanatical legal theories the Supreme Court continues to reject, as Jack Smith loses every time he goes to that court. They have used investigative tactics and techniques against every grandma in a red MAGA hat who was within a country mile of the Capitol on the January 6th riot that they are not using, for instance, against the Antifa and the BLM rioters or the Democratic street militias that were marching outside of Supreme Court justices' homes, or that have been vandalizing statues of veterans in direct violation of federal law and occupying college campuses and federal lands. They haven't used any of those tactics. Look at what else they're doing. They're investigating Catholics because they think their mass is too conservative, or they've been pursuing people who are saying prayers outside of abortion clinics when they're not investigating pro-Hamas lunatics who are conducting nascent pogroms against Jews across America. Of course, the Department of Justice has been used to target Donald Trump and Donald Trump's supporters. That has to stop, and it will stop after we get Joe Biden.
So, Senator, I have known and worked with both Dana Bash and Kristen Welker on the biggest stages there are, presidential debates. I like them both. They're both very smart. They both had the same response, which is that there's no evidence of weaponization. And I think to myself, do they really not follow the news? Do they not know that Jack Smith works for Merrick Garland? Do they not know about the FBI? Do they not know, or do they simply reject it? What do you think, Senator?
I think they just reject it. I mean, especially Kristen Welker. I mean, they're just wearing blue jerseys at this point, and also looking for any harbor in a storm. Right now, they're desperate not to ask anyone more questions about Joe Biden's fitness for the job. So they go back to their, old faithful, tried and true hits, trying to press Republicans on this or that issue that the American people also, frankly, don't care that much about. But there can be no doubt, again, the Department of Justice has been weaponized. Look at Donald Trump and Joe Biden's classified documents cases. Donald Trump, a president who has declassification authority, who has certain rights and prerogatives under the Presidential Records Act, gets charged with federal crimes by Jack Smith. Joe Biden, a vice president who has no such authorities, who has no such rights and prerogatives, gets off scot-free. I guess maybe the best you could say he got off scot-free is because he's non-compos mentos, which I would recall that Kamala Harris and everyone on down condemned in the harshest terms Robert Hur when he released his report saying Joe Biden would be a sympathetic and confused old man to a jury. And now I think he's been totally vindicated. But that's just another example. Those two document cases about how the Department of Justice has plainly had two standards of justice under Joe Biden.
Last question. Former President Trump on Truth Social graciously offered another debate to Joe Biden, provided there was no moderator. I don't think he should do that. I don't think he should go on the stage again because the current president is not capable of doing it. But what did you make of President Trump's offer to President Biden?
Well, if the Democrats want another test of Joe Biden's abilities, then that would be a good one. I think they've already agreed to one in September. Of course, the cake will be baked by then. I would just point out, though, Hugh, that Joe Biden has obviously declined since he ran for president in 2020, and that's an even further decline since he was vice president. But the Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage a couple weeks ago is the exact same Joe Biden that Democratic primary voters elected or nominated overwhelmingly earlier this year in primaries, in some cases that were just a few weeks ago. So the Democrats don't have a Joe Biden age problem. They have a Joe Biden polling problem.
Well said, Senator Cotton. Always a pleasure. Enjoy the summer. Go Guardians.